I'm talking to Paul Flowers, leader in global design at LIXIL, former chief designer at Grower, about what the company's been up to and its successes during the last terrible year. Hi.
Hi, Paul. Good morning. Thanks very much for having us. Yeah, super excited. Looking forward to a fruitful discussion today. It's our 12th year, I guess, of working together, Grower with WAF. And yeah, really exciting. Despite the times, of course, a really interesting time for us with regards to innovation, technology, and products that we're producing.
So, Paul, perhaps just to kick us off in broad terms, what significant trends has Grower noticed over the course of the last year? Has it been famine or feast or somewhere in between?
It's really interesting. If I think of it as a creative, whether it's an economic downturn or something as serious as COVID that's happening right now, ironically, we often see those as periods of huge activity and push, huge activity in terms of innovation from a company perspective, which makes my job, of course, busy and really interesting, our team in LIXIL. And then on top of that, I think it's the acceptance of consumers. And we see a big surge, consumers really accelerating and being more open to innovation, and particularly in their homes with something like COVID happening. So it's been, I guess it's been incredibly busy for us since this all started, 9-10 months ago. When we look at trends, we're tracking long-term societal trends. Grower in particular, it's not an FMCG brand. You're looking at durable products that last 7-10 years or more. So we have to really look at the long-term trends. Now the situation with the pandemic will have, of course, a profound effect on us on our short term, but we have to look at much longer-term trends because, like I said, it takes anything from 12 to 24 months to produce our products. So therefore, we have to anticipate what's coming and what's coming next. With regards to trends, we're tracking 3 macro trends right now, and that's urbanization, sustainability, and one that's particularly relevant, I think, at this moment in time, which is health and well-being. And those 3 trends, of course, are allowing us to explore what's happening in society and what things are being accelerated. So, for example, health and well-being, one can imagine sanitation and all of those aspects, how people are interacting with products, how people are interacting with spaces, and the innovation being brought into those spaces has accelerated greatly in the last 9 months. But I do believe, looking at long-term societal trends, that whilst this period right now will expedite existing trends that were growing and manifesting themselves. So I don't think there will be a huge long-term trend shift. I just think there will be a rapid increase in these particular trends coming to the forefront.
And I suppose, let's say, the electrical industries in the Depression in the 1930s, which made great strides and made lots of money, there are sectors of the economy, obviously one thinks of delivery services during the pandemic, which flourish. And I guess that Grower in a kind of happy position of what may be downsized for a lot of people could be upsized for you. I mean, I'm just thinking about, for example, with people spending so much time at home, the kitchen and the bathroom loom rather more important in their daily lives.
Absolutely, Paul. I think, well, there's a couple of things here. First of all, there's this whole concept of, like I said, where certain innovations and are being accelerated. So Grower being, let's say, at the forefront of developing innovative technologies and things for the home, things like sensor technologies, shower toilets that they've introduced into Europe in the last few years that have lots of, I would say, health and well-being functionalities. These have become more relevant than ever before. And like you say, now people are actually spending more time in their home. They're really starting to understand how they navigate the space in a different way. And, and it's becoming a multifaceted space for them at home. And particularly in the bathroom, we see the bathroom migrating into this other area because people are doing lots of exercise and meditation and yoga and things at home. And the bathroom, which is traditionally quite an underutilized area of the house, now we see it being repurposed. And like I said, some of those trends that we've seen for a few years now coming, the bathroom bedroom coming together, the bathroom and an exercise area, like a health and well-being sanctuary coming together. We're seeing these things rapidly accelerate during this time.
And I suppose that in the debate that some house builders are having, do you have a second bathroom or do you turn it into a study? Well, even if you do that, the implication is that if you only have one bathroom rather than two, then actually it's got to be rather better. It's probably going to be bigger and more sophisticated, even if you do decide to go down that route.
Yeah, I think when I speak to architects, and of course WAF for us, one of the interesting things over the years, I've really seen WAF as a great source for our team to uncover insights. Working with architects, we always find them very generous with information and really helping us, let's say, plot some of these trends that are happening. And we've seen for a number of years now that the bathroom, they're starting to afford the bathroom more space. And with things like these, like I said, hybrid spaces emerging, you are starting to see the bathroom being afforded more space because the utilization will change as it takes on other forms. I mean, that's a challenge for the technology, of course, because as you open up, say, a space, the bathroom into the bedroom, you have to look at things like odor absorption, you have to look at sound. So you're developing lots of different technologies for the different environments. And as you say, I think these areas will become, with the new technologies coming through that we have with spa toilets, with sensor faucets and all of these things, flush plates for toilets that you don't have to touch, etc. I think, yeah, that space will be given more consideration, I think, consumers, especially now they're spending a considerable amount of time in their homes and them.
And without giving trade secrets away, but are there types of products you're now looking at as a result of pandemic and more home working and more time spent in the home that you can see coming to market in the next couple of years?
Yeah, we've seen obviously a rapid let's say, uptake in this area that we call them prosumers. So you have the professional environment where one can expect to see sensor faucets. You go to an airport or a railway station, you see products which are touchless. And they were developed for two reasons really. One was of course health and hygiene, but the other was for speed of use. And so if you can get people into those environments in the public spaces in and out more efficiently with the sensor faucets, that's obviously better for the usage flow. But now we're seeing prosumers, they're seeing the benefits of these kind of, let's say, products like sensor faucets that they've seen in the professional space and growers been providing for years. And now they're actually seeing the benefits of bringing them into their home environments. And benefits, of course, in terms of sanitation, but benefits also in terms of convenience. So everything from, we're seeing them, of course, having hands-free products because you don't actually touch them, so there's no cross-contamination of surfaces, for example. We're seeing that you don't have to clean the products as regular if you're not touching them, of course. And then on the other side of that, with the sensor faucets, we're seeing this whole, I would say, the usage bringing benefits such as sustainable benefits, such as water reduction. So for example, in my house, we have these kind of prosumer products, sensor products in my children's bathroom. So I installed them a couple of years ago simply because, in the children's bathroom, they would tend to leave the tap running if they were brushing their teeth, consume lots and lots of water. So we installed a couple of years ago the sensor faucet, so it only comes on when they put their toothbrush underneath the faucet. And that's made immense savings in terms of water, so it's much more sustainable. And it has other benefits. So we're seeing the prosumers seeing what's available and bringing that now into their home. And we're seeing a huge upturn, both in the public domain, but also in the domestic domain.
I think it's a great reminder of the old British evil of the hot and cold taps, separate taps on the sink, with people burning their hands under the one and freezing them under the other, rather than wait for the sink to fill up, which would immediately become scummy and soapy. Sensor technology's got an awful lot going for it. Perhaps we could just go into that in a little more detail. Health and hygiene, always big issues for grower. And for the global population, in different circumstances, different climates. How do you think in general that architecture and design can respond in fresh ways to the challenges we're facing, which there were challenges we had anyway, but challenges that have been slightly transformed by the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I always say, of course, architecture, design, all of those elements, they're all one for the consumer. So it's really great working closely with architects because, as I've said in the past, I think consumers experience everything from the holistic space all the way down to the intimacy of interfacing with a product. All of those things create an experience. So I think it's really imperative that architects and designers and interior designers work really closely together, because ultimately they're providing that single experience, I think, if they do a great job. I think there's lots that we can do. We're looking at, of course, navigation of the space. We're looking at how we can make that space more effective. Short term for things like health and hygiene with the pandemic, but long term also, which is, I think, a bigger issue, which is the sustainability reasons. How can we consume less resource? So I think, so we can start to create, let's say, environments where the experience is better, but they're actually much more efficient. And there are a number of technologies and products that we have in our portfolio that ensure that you have a great experience, but you're reducing consumption of resource such as water.
Now, I can remember when I was a student, I used to work as a hospital porter at Westminster Hospital. This was right at the end of the 1960s, going into the early 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
And even at that time, we had sinks where the water was all operated by foot controls.
Yeah.
There would be a foot pad on the floor because it was a hospital environment. It amazes me that the sort of touch-free technology, really until quite recently, was mysterious. It was part of that sort of professional world, but no one ever thought that it should be used in consumer circumstances, even in sort of semi-public buildings like hotels and airports. And I'm assuming that touchless technology is kind of just an automatic part of your kind of, I don't know what the phrase is, your lexicon of design possibilities. I imagine it's getting more important.
Absolutely. I think alternative ways to control the product, of course, like I said, that's been coming for some time. So to grow, we've had for decades now, we've had sensor technology. So infrared sensing technology. And in the last few years, we've developed alternative ways to use those kind of technologies, but to cater for different consumer preferences. So we have everything now from regular sensor products that, proximity sensors, like I said, infrared sensors, to we have products that you can, in the kitchen, that you can actually wave your foot underneath the cupboard. There's a small sensor there, and then that switches the faucet on. We have products such as Sensi Arena, WCs, that as you walk into the toilet, the lid opens automatically, it senses you. So you technically don't have to touch the toilet at all. You can go to the toilet and then simply, without touching the flushing system or anything, you can leave that space and it will flush automatically and close the lid afterwards. And then you can navigate to the wash basin and the water switches on itself again with that kind of sensor. So we have products that have proximity sensors, we have products you can control with your feet, and we even have kitchen faucets where we use a thing called touch sensors, which are capacitive sensors. So you can touch them, for example, say with your elbow. So if you're cooking, you're using, let's say cooking and chopping chicken or something, you don't contaminate the surfaces you touch because you're doing a particular function. You can actually use the cleaner parts of your body, but have that physical interaction. So we've gone all the way from that semi-physical interaction with capacitive to completely touch-free technologies as we've evolved and opened up the consumer offering.
Now, I'm assuming that if there are circumstances where people do have to touch things, but it's also true that there are materials which are pretty much COVID or any other infection, well, they're much more resistant than some others. I wonder if that comes into play with your range of products, or in fact, whether you can actually pretty much avoid touching anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always a big fan of, the best way to solve a problem is to just eliminate the problem. So for me, I think rather than having products that you have to clean, the consumers don't want to have to clean their products. So if you can have an interaction with that product where you still benefit from its use, but with completely without having to touch, of course, I think that's a much, much better solution. The other thing that we're seeing as well with consumers short term, and this will accelerate this anyway, we're seeing a preference for more contemporary designs, so less authentic designs, because you started to see with the authentic aesthetic, and we've seen this historically in the past with different pandemics, in architecture and in design, you actually see a simplification of the aesthetics, because actually with the simplification of the detailing on the aesthetics, it's much easier to clean and maintain. And that's a hygiene driven kind of aesthetic, if you like, direction.
Yes, I think a very good example of that was the design of hospital beds, and even chairs that people use in hospitals, where, at one stage to clean a bed required you to sort of touch about 30 different surfaces and parts.
Yeah.
And obviously a really smart design could eliminate most of that.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, Paul. And I remember actually discussing with some architects a number of years ago. I was fascinated. They were actually looking at in hotels, the turnaround of hotels, and how they could create a much more efficient, let's say, room for cleaning, because obviously cleaning is a big part, and it's quite expensive. So they were even looking into the details and I would say process time of when somebody was cleaning the bathroom, having a round mirror versus a square mirror. Having a round mirror, even at that detail, was much easier to clean quicker and thoroughly than having a square mirror way into the corners. So, we get lots of these insights about how to create products which are easier to clean, kind of hassle-free, maintenance-free. And
Now,
come from all areas.
yeah, I was going to say that in your design work, both at Grower and then in the wider LIXIL organization, you've always been able to either commission or rely on behavioral research. I mean, I remember you telling me years ago about filming people in showers to find out actually how people really wash themselves in a shower, rather than just make assumptions based on what one might do oneself. And that actually influenced the design of your shower heads. I'm sort of assuming that all that sort of behavioral research is going to pay dividends, and I guess you would do more of it in relation to people spending more time in the home environment. I mean, is it easy to be able to do research into what people are doing? I mean, do you send observers into their homes, or do you do sort of Zoom type questionnaires? How do you go about that?
So good point. So there are a number of, let's say, areas that we can explore to gain information and insights. Everything from visiting trade fairs, everything from discussing with architects and designers and opinion leaders, all the way down to the consumer research. And we actually call it at Grower and at LIXIL, we call this pre-search. So we're trying to actually do much more upfront research before we even start a project, before we even start a design, because what we're trying now is to frame the question much more. We're trying to ask what the people want, what the people need. And the best way to do that actually is, obviously you can use research, articulated research, quantitative studies, different things. You can interview people on Zoom, even in times like now. But the best kind of research that we find is the unarticulated stuff, the ethnographic research, us really trying to uncover sometimes problems or issues that consumers aren't even aware of. They're real pain points, but they won't articulate what they are. But when you observe them in context, they really help us as designers and as creatives to then, let's say, visualize that opportunity. And then when we share it back to consumers, they're delighted, because they're like, actually, yeah, I can really empathize with that. I really do have those issues. When I'm using those things, that really does happen. And there's a real delight in a piece of technology or design that you present back to the consumer that they haven't even articulated, but there's this in-depth need or want for that particular project or product to solve a problem they may have.
I think that leads us on to a very different sort of market or condition. that grower and LIXIL have taken an increasing interest in recent years, which is sanitation in poorer countries.
Yeah.
Now, you know, you have sponsored the Water Research Prize, and we're doing that again this year. How is that program going? And do you see any changes in the approach to it as the result of these increased health concerns?
Well, yeah, okay. So, I mean, LIXIL is a very purpose-driven company. So we have brands like Sato at LIXIL, and Sato is a really interesting brand, something we're immensely proud of in the LIXIL group. Sato looked at, let's say, a real challenge, a real issue. You know, we're talking right now about COVID. I guess you know, right at this moment in time. But if you think there are 3 billion people on the planet that don't even have access to soap and water, let's say 3 billion people. So Sato is a really interesting brand. It had two main product streams. You know, it originally started, and I think the first products were launched in 2013 in Bangladesh, but originally started with a really beautifully simplified, I would say, toilet pan that had a really simple self-closing mechanism that was really easy to install and much more affordable, so for developing countries. And I think that the Sato pan now, it's reached over, I think it's in more than 18 countries, if I believe. No, actually 38 countries, and I think 18 million people have had access now to that product. So that's been a really interesting, I think, endeavor for the Sato brand, starting with the pan. And then just recently, we've introduced the Sato tap, which, as you say, particularly in these times, it couldn't be more relevant and more important. So if you can imagine, something as basic as just washing one's hands with soap and water is actually a powerful deterrent, ironically, against the COVID virus. And now we've developed this Sato tap that is a really simple device that just has a couple of components, and the water source comes in the form of a device that everybody has readily available in the kind of markets we're looking at, so a plastic water bottle. So we repurpose that plastic water bottle that screws into this device. That creates a little water reservoir, and then the water is very efficiently dispensed via the Sato tap. So that allows you, with the simple soap holder that sits beside it, to, let's say, get hand sanitation to areas that have been very difficult to get water and sanitation to in the past. So it's a really exciting area. And Grower has been working really carefully and closely with Sato and UNICEF on a number of initiatives recently, let's say, to push this brand outside of the wider group as well, and gain access to as many people as possible.
Now, I think the Grower WAF Water Research Prize, as mentioned, we've been doing this for a while. It's in its third year now. Any thoughts about what has emerged from that? I mean, we've had some amazing ideas. Obviously, only one prize is given each year. It's a cash prize which goes into either initiating or research or supporting an existing research program. How do you see that?
Yeah, so obviously it's in its third year. You know, when the opportunity came along, let's say, to be part of the Water Prize, it was something I think that it was very easy for us as Grower to say, yeah, we'd definitely like to be involved. You know, for Grower, water is everything. So if you think of the Grower, let's say, complete brand claim is Pure Freud Anwasser, pure joy of water. Everything Grower does really focuses around water, how we can deliver water in a more sustainable way. So we call it ecological enjoyment. How can we create more enjoyment, but actually with less resource? You know, when this prize came up, the Water Prize, we jumped at the chance to be involved. In the last couple of years that I've been judging the competition, you know, I found it fascinating, and I know, judging with yourself and other judges, we've always found it very difficult actually to choose a single project, because the ingenuity and the input, let's say, from different architects and designers around the world has been fascinating. This year, my colleague Patrick Speck who's the leader of LIXIL Global Design, and Mina, he will be judging the competition. So and is judging the competition. So I can't give away too much. But discussing with him in detail, again, we've had amazing entries from every continent. And the quality of the work is amazing, I'd like to thank all the architects and designers that have applied, because it's a really noble project, and I think the prize at the end really allows them some freedom to take their idea forward and explore what often is an area which could be of true value and benefit. And it gives them that freedom and flexibility to explore a bit further hopefully into production.
I've always thought there's an irony, if irony is the right word, in the fact that the grower as a business increasingly sees itself as being in the water business, even though, other than carbonation and heating or cooling, of course, you don't make water. I mean, nobody makes water really, apart from very odd desert circumstances. Yet all your products, or most of them, are absolutely intimately bound with a substance which is at the root of sustainability, which is 90% of all of us as human beings. I wonder if you're almost, your own attitude to water from when you first got involved with growers, first started engaging with the management of water through technology, whether your own feelings about the subject have changed at all.
Wow, that's really interesting. I guess my background, I very much worked for technology companies in the past, and I worked for brands like Philips. So yeah, I think when I originally entered this space as a product designer, with a technological background, it always amazed me actually how analog the bathroom and the kitchen was. And I was fascinated and drawn in, of course, originally because of the beauty of the source that you're working with, like you say, water. We wake up in the morning, a shower can revitalize us. We jump into a bathtub, it can really relax us in the hectic world that we live in. We hydrate from this area. We use this as a communal area in the kitchen. We gather around the tap and we make teas and coffees, and it really is like a home sort of well in your home, and it's such an integral, important part. And then I guess now that we see all of the technologies coming in, and for me it's very exciting, like I said, coming from a technology background, seeing technologies that allow you to navigate the space in a different way, technologies that allow you to control with sensors, technologies that allow you to pause water, so really looking at the process of use, toilets that will cleanse you at the end. If you've gone to the toilet, it washes your backside, it dries your backside, odor absorption takes away the smells, all of those inconvenient things that we don't like to talk about, intimate things, but does all these amazing things now. So we've seen technology, particularly in the last 10 years, come into these analog spaces, and I think provide true consumer benefit. But that's something that we have to, as grower, be really mindful, and we really constantly remind ourselves, and in the wider LIXIL group, to say technology is there to serve human beings, and technology has to be useful. Technology has to have a reason for being, and if we can deliver that in a way that's relevant to consumers, it can completely transform that experience and make it a much more valuable experience.
As a final point, you mentioned a couple of words which I hadn't come across before. One was prosumer, blending of professional and consumer, and the other one, pre-search. What is it that you try to find out in order to ask the questions that you want your researchers to get definitive answers to? And it occurs to me that actually, in the same way that people are now talking about the blended lifestyles, where you don't cease going into the office, at least once lockdown's over, but you're likely to spend more time at work. And in the way in which our own events, I think World Architecture Festival, the next live event, will have a more significant virtual element to it as well. Will make it easier for people all around the world to be able to become remote delegates, if you will. that this seems to be something which is, you know, it's kind of in the zeitgeist, isn't it? That the old rules about, well, something's either this or it's that, seem to be merging. And it struck me that actually in the earlier days of Grower, the design and manufacturing disciplines were seen very much as separate operations. The manufacturing took precedence, and basically the designers produced what the manufacturers thought would work.
Yeah.
And that kind of flipped under new regimes, which you were a big part of, into a world where actually design became far more important because it was focusing on end users and what they might want. And the manufacturing, of course, had to be exemplary, but on the other hand, it wasn't going to be manufacturing that decided the outcome of product research. Everything was going to start focusing on design. And in a sense, I suppose you could describe Grower and the wider world of LIXIL as one in which this blending of activities has sort of become second nature, even though the way we continue to use the sort of products you make, or the more basic ones, and the way we think about water, probably the rest of us haven't quite got there yet.
No, I think it's a really, it's a really good point. I think when you think of like this blended concept, I think, and things like research, the main reason we do that is simply because we want to be relevant. And rather than trying to just create things and then trying to find somebody to buy them as a company, as an organization, what we're trying to do to ensure that what we do is relevant, has purpose, and is meaningful, we're starting at the beginning by asking people. It's a really simple process. We're just starting at the beginning to really understand and frame out what are the issues that people are having, what is the context that this product or service may be going into, and you know what kind of areas or issues will this solve, what problems will this solve. And I think in doing that kind of research at the very beginning and identifying and highlighting, it's allowing our innovation to have, I think, much more relevance. So rather than us have, let's say, because we have, of course, a huge resource of engineering and research and development and technology teams. So rather than just have the teams like, which, and this happens in many other companies that I've interfaced with personally in the past, but you know, you'll have lots of people working on stuff all disjointed and inventing things. Well, we didn't want to do it. We wanted to bring, let's say, some not so much control, but some relevance to that, and to create a structure where if we can create meaningful things, we already know there's going to be a customer waiting. If we can solve these problems, if we can bring all of our resources together, working in a single direction, it means we can probably create better innovation, and more technology than our competitors. So that's what we've kind of done. We've kind of, let's say, regrouped and created a process where we do everything at the beginning. And as a result of that, I think we're starting to see, and in times like now, we're starting to benefit from some of the leaps we've taken in technology, you know, and things like bringing the shower toilets to Europe, things like having all these different sensor technologies that we've invested in our portfolio. Now we're really seeing and reaping the benefits of those things. And as consumers accelerate their acceptance, like you mentioned, prosumers, and allow that technology into their home, brands like us that have been investing heavily in these areas, I think we will benefit from that patience and that constant push to make things better.
And that extends, final point, to the world of delivery, which has become so much more significant to us during lockdown. Many delivery companies have prospered, but in your world, this is all about packaging, ease of access, and a sort of idea of total design, where it's not just the product you're designing, but actually what is the experience of people getting it when it arrives at their front door.
Yeah, I mean that's very true. I think you spoke about this earlier, but for me, very much design was often seen, you know, I can think about, 15 years ago, design was seen as an aesthetic, let's say, expression at the end of the process. You'd kind of created the technology direction, basically the outline of the product. The design was used, let's say, to create an aesthetic. That certainly isn't the case in LIXIL Group, and that's why LIXIL Global Design, we've been elevated in the company to the highest level, because very much the CEO of LIXIL, he's always seen that there's a real benefit, let's say, to having design at the very, very beginning of the process and uncovering the insights, and then using design actually as creative problem solvers to identify the opportunity, and often to visualize that opportunity in a context that might not even exist. It may not even exist today, the context, but design has the ability to, let's say, to create the opportunity and visualize that in a tangible way, that then the business can say, well, this is an interesting area for us to start to develop and to invest in long term. So you're right, design has had a complete shift. And I think, and I urge designers and creatives as well to really to push to show in the organizations that design is way beyond aesthetics. It can add tremendous value to creating relevant products which have a social purpose and move companies, organizations, and brands forward.
I'd like to thank Grower for their ongoing support for our World Architecture Festival programs, both live and virtual, and thank Paul Flowers for his time today and his insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul. Great to see you as always.